Celia Franca, the visionary founder, the indomitable director, the complicated woman. What does it take? What combination of guts and glamour, combativeness and persuasion makes for a pioneer? What kind of person challenges, invents, and surmounts impossible odds with unswerving vision?
I think I was about 2.5, and my mother took me to see a film. And I remember crying my eyes out and saying, "I want to go on the stage, I want to go on the stage."
Her profile was dance, like an icon. And once you saw that, that meant ballet in this country.
For my 8th birthday, my parents took me to see Giselle in Hamilton, and Celia Franca was dancing the leading role. I can still see in my mind, I can see her mad scene. It was extraordinary, and that was the reason I started ballet lessons, was because of Celia Franca.
She's one of the great ladies in the ballet, together with Ninette, Valois, Marie Rambert. And these ladies have some similarity, great similarity, their energy, their intelligence, their dedication.
My time with the National Ballet was one long fight. There wasn't anything that I achieved that I didn't fight for. Nothing.
I remember this tiny little woman, Celia, getting up on stage and telling the Russians where to go to get off that stage because it was our turn. She wasn't afraid of anybody, it seemed.
And she handed us the world. And then she just opened up all kinds of doors for us to walk through.
She just plowed through. It was amazing. You know, she just put her head down and bulled, and wasn't going to take any nonsense whatsoever. She was a risk taker, and Celia just never stopped risking it.
She certainly did take risks. With all of us dancers of the National Ballet of Canada, my first ballet examiner when I was 10 was Celia Franca.
I don't know if people are really born to something, but I think if I was born to anything, it was probably to start a ballet company and boss people around. Because I remember as a little girl being the leader of this group in the street and wanting them to do beautiful things. It was really music that got me into dance, because there was a wedding and there was a band. And I danced around the tables. I think I was about 2.5 or something. And I conducted the band. And the leader of the band said to my mother, "You should have her trained for the ballet." And I had never heard that word before, neither had my mother. That stuck. And I nagged my mother until she finally took me to the Guildhall School of Music, where I met Sir Landon Ronald. I don't know why. He took one look at me and gave me a scholarship for ballet training. And I think I passed the advanced RAD examination at a very early age, like 13 or 14 or something. My father was a ladies' tailor. He worked in a damp, awful place. He had often said, "You must give up this ballet business, you'll never earn a living at it." So at that time, I heard about an audition that was going on in the West End of London. I was 14 at the time. I just walked out of the school, which I loved, the King Alfred School. It was a co-educational school, it was wonderful. Boys, lovely. I went and presented myself, and I said, play the same music as the woman before. And it was that Fred Astaire number. I won't dance, don't ask me. I won't dance, my dear, with you. I'll never forget it. And I remember doing these tap steps, da, 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 and zhuzhing it up, you know. And I mean, I was plain. I had bobbed hair and a fringe, very ordinary looking, and no makeup. And I got the job at the age of 14. And the glory of it was I was able to take my money home every week and put it on the table in front of my father and say, you said I couldn't earn a living. So it was a victory of sorts. I was still Celia Franca. I didn't change my name till quite a bit later, when I joined the Ballet Rambert. And Marie Rambert said she didn't want any chorus girls. She can come to my school, but I'm not going to teach her myself. So she put me in Antony Tudor's class.
Oh. Celia, with her luck and pluck, gained a footing into the hotbed of English creative ballet, still in its infancy in pre-war London.
What good fortune I had, because he was so intellectually challenging. And before I knew it, I was being put in his ballets, which were done on Sunday evenings at the Mercury Theatre. And so then Marie Rambert changed her mind then.
What I knew of her before I came into the orbit of Celia was that she was recognized as, without question, one of the best dramatic dancers. Pull out Lilac Garden and just watch her. She acts the pants off of everybody.
Lilac Garden is my life. And there I was, age 15. I suppose there was nobody else, but he chose me to do this role. And the way he taught the role, the way he explained to me, this gave me the character immediately.
Her performances were contemporary and timeless. It transcends through time.
At Ballet Rambert, Celia met Leo Kersley, her first husband. Together, they moved to the Sadlers Wells Ballet, and they were hired by the pioneer of British classical ballet, Ninette de Valois.
And I got married at the age of 19. During the war, I was very happy to leave home. Not that my parents were cruel, but they were so uncultured. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. They had not too much education in the arts. My husband, he was a conscientious objector, and he was put in prison. And at that time, I was dancing with Ninette de Valois, with the Sadlers Wells Ballet, and we had a Sunday off. And I said, may I go to London for the day to visit my husband who was in prison? And she said no. So I went anyway.
Stanislas Idzikowski,
my favorite teacher.
he used to share roles with Nijinsky.
He taught me a very valuable lesson. One day I got angry with myself and I started to cry in the middle of the class. And he said to me, he said, go into the dressing room and bang your head against the wall. So I did. It taught me a lesson. You have to hide your feelings. You're not allowed to just let go every time you feel like having a cry. It taught me discipline.
Celia was now in what was to become England's Royal Ballet. A classical ballet company is a hierarchy, structured with principal dancers, soloists, and corps de ballet. Yet Celia, as a dramatic dancer, had already made the covers of the Dancing Times.
I was so interested in everybody else's roles. So I learned all the corps de ballet roles. I learned all the principal dancers, the men's roles. I learned everything, which was why, when I came to Canada, I was able to teach 4 acts of Swan Lake, the whole of Giselle. I had no notes. It was all in my head. I watched and I learned and I loved. I just loved.
She had a superb reputation. She was somebody that you just didn't take your eyes off.
I was so fortunate to have mixed with these wonderful stars. I respected them.
As early as age 25, Celia showed she was destined for more than just dancing.
Ninette de Valois opened her new school. She asked me if I would run it. I taught one of her classes, and the dancers were crazy about it. I said, I'm not ready. The war was just over. At Covent Garden, I looked on the notice board, and it said Sleeping Beauty for 3 months. So I left. I didn't have a job or anything. I just left. I just didn't want to do Sleeping Beauty for 3 months. I thought, I'm going to get bored to tears.
I arrived from New Zealand in 1946. Celia had resigned from the Royal Ballet, and Dame Ninette asked her if she would create a ballet for the new company forming at Sadlers Wells.
It's called Khadra. It was a big success. Rave reviews. And that was when my mother finally dragged my father to see the ballet. And he sat there watching his daughter on the stage, who taking her bow, and he nudged his stranger, next door neighbor, and said, "That's my daughter, that's my daughter." Finally, he was proud of me.
In 1949, Celia Franca took yet another step as an innovator.
I was the first choreographer to be commissioned by the British Broadcasting Corporation to create ballets, especially for the television medium.
And it was fascinating to watch, and I have to assure you how extremely well it was received. I'd never seen dancing shot in front of a camera before, and was quite an innovation.
In under 30 years, Celia Franca had made headlines in numerous arenas. She was shooting to the top of these professions, and little did she know that there were new frontiers to conquer. In 1950, Toronto's Pearl Whitehead, Sidney Malqueen and Eileen Woods sent Stuart James as their emissary to Dame Ninette de Valois for her advice on who could found a classical ballet company in Canada. Her response? Celia Franca.
I always thought she was meant to be a director of a company.
She went down the list and stopped and said, "Celia Franca, if you can get her."
She wasn't at all sure that she wanted to do it, you see, and I wanted to persuade her to.
I was invited by the 3 ladies to come to Canada and have a look. And I said to the ladies, "I think you need me here." And I thought, well, what can I lose? And I accepted a job, a feasibility study. Could we have a national ballet company in Canada, or could we not? Well, I thought, well, this is going to be a lark.
Celia found that she had to sell the idea that Canada needed the arts. CBC Television hadn't started yet, and Tom Patterson, founder of the Stratford Festival, asked her advice 2 years later. She auditioned Canada itself, scouring the country with the meticulousness that was to become legendary. She taught and collected an odd assortment of aspiring professional dancers, setting the highest standards from the outset.
So the National Ballet, in a way, was a catalyst for the other arts in Canada to get moving.
She started with nothing but plain guts.
Right from the start, I realized that the teachers had to be helped. Because if we didn't have good teachers in Canada, we wouldn't have a good ballet company. And of course, I had Betty Oliphant to help me, who was a brilliant teacher. While I was working at the Eden Auditorium, she, as a member of the Canadian Dance Teachers Association, was asked to please find out what Celia Franca is doing, you know, because they all thought I was up to no good, you know. And we talked, we got along quite well, and we became very good friends. We did start the National Ballet Summer School first, and that was in the summer of 1951. And then out of that summer school, we got this little group of kids together to start the National Ballet Company on nothing, you know, but nothing. We even took it on tour that year. How we did, I don't know. And we couldn't afford an orchestra. 2 pianos, though. That's one thing I insisted upon right from the start, live music.
I remember walking up the iron staircase at the old St. Lawrence Hall, and Grant Stratty was her assistant. And so he said, "You're our new pianist." I said, "I am?" And he took me in to see Miss Franca. She looked marvelous, but I had the wit to know that I had met a force. She terrified me.
Celia Franca was one of those impossible people who would never give up.
The artists who were craving, they wanted to dance. They didn't have the opportunity to dance in their own country.
Spread out.
And in those days, she was also a dancer. So her eyes were on you backstage and front of stage.
My own dancing on the stage for several years, starting in 1951, was a necessity. I had to fill spaces.
Everybody danced everything. If one of the girls was sick, Celia would go into the corps.
And people like Lois Smith were hardly trained, you know. I mean, she was beautiful, but
in order to get that far in that much time, we did a tremendous amount of work.
What I have not anticipated was that there would be very few trained dancers ready for the profession. I had to get them into a cohesive style. I had 6 weeks in which to do it before we opened in November of 1951 at the Eton Auditorium. There was not enough work in Toronto to keep the dancers working, and so we had to tour. There was no question about it. We had to tour.
She looked after us. One time when we were touring, we were short of money, and the orchestra had to be paid because they were unionized and we weren't. She sat us all down. She said, "Now, if anybody needs any money, you know where to come. You come to me."
The money was always the big problem. Oh, you know, I mean, what can you do without money?
At that time, the company was really a family. I mean, really a family.
Lois Smith, she went around to the dancers who were being paid something, I don't know, really peanuts. They couldn't eat, really. And she took out all the pennies from their purses so that it would go towards the fund, which was to make sure we didn't have to cancel a tour. There was still a lot of work to be done to get the public on our side, to expose the company. So the touring was very, very important. During that period, a very famous partnership came out, and that was the partnership between Lois Smith, prima ballerina, and David Adams, our premier danseur. It helped to make the company famous. I used to sit on the bus, and nobody ever sat next to Miss Franca, because Miss Franca was always doing programs and casting and filling in for people who were injured. And, you know, a gentleman came down from the back of the bus and looked at this empty seat. He said, "Is anybody sitting there?" I said, "Well, obviously no," you know. So he sat down, and he turned out to be my future husband. It was J. Morton, and he had no idea he was sitting next to Celia Franca, you know, who was the big boss.
The touring was paying off, and the dancers of the National Ballet were gaining in confidence. Yet, Celia was waging constant battles on several fronts.
And I had to sell my ideas to the board. On the whole, they were all right, but there were a few who anything I did was wrong. You know? The trouble with Celia is she doesn't know the value of $1. My problem was that I couldn't get hold of the bloody dollar. I remember fighting to get a Friday wage for my dancers, fighting, so that they would be able to eat. And there were times when I didn't win.
I'm hoping that there will be a little less persecution of Canadian artists gradually. I mean, my board of directors got very frightened when we had this enormous deficit at the end of last season.
At the end of every show, Celia begged for money. I can remember as a student up high in the balcony for her farewell performance of Giselle. Amidst cheers and flowers, she spoke of her dream of a National Ballet school, and said, if anyone knows of a beautiful building, just call me.
It was the only time I ever cried at a board meeting. I thought it was a fait accompli, that we were going to get the school. And then there was one member of the board, and he started to insinuate that I didn't really want a school. I thought, my God, I've lost it. I've lost the school. And the chairman said, shut up or go and get yourself another board of directors. But we got the school.
And who would be responsible for the dream and putting it into reality?
Well, as you know, Celia Franca is the artistic director of the company. I have been her ballet mistress since the beginning of the company, and I think she and I together have shared this dream.
Betty put her in full charge of the school, and finally, at her insistence, really, she wanted to become the director of the school, and I said, absolutely, Betty, go ahead. I gave her absolutely free rein to do whatever she thought was right, and I think what she did was right.
Celia was where you were going, and Betty was, as I said, how you got there.
She could train a dancer from scratch. I couldn't. I could take a professional and turn that professional into a super professional.
And Celia was a consummate professional. Her experience in England included her innovative triumphs with the BBC. When she came to Canada, she was armed with a letter to Charles Jennings, heading up the not-yet-born CBC.
When television first started, I couldn't wait to get in. Those were very exciting, pioneering days for CBC television.
Tonight, CBC Folio presents, in full-length production, the North American television premiere of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake.
I worked with Norman Campbell as my producer-director. We did 14 productions together, and we never had a crossword. Not one. The thing I'm proudest of is when we did Romeo and Juliet. I thought that was a big stepping stone. I mean, to begin with, we moved from the Royal Alexandra Theatre to the O'Keeffe Centre. We became big.
It was a huge, immense decision on Miss Franca's part to have her company perform in this big venue. We got the very famous John Cranko to come to Toronto and teach us Romeo and Juliet, which was phenomenal.
Grant Stratty wrote to me. He had gone to Stuttgart, seen it, and said this would be wonderful for our company. So I immediately got hold of John, and he said yes. He was in Khadra in that ballet, and we became good friends. I remember Johnny wanting me to do Lady Capulet, and he started to teach me a bit of it, and I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful role. Talk about meaty, you know.
For the National Ballet, Romeo and Juliet was a seminal ballet. It displayed the dramatic depth throughout the ranks of the company's dancers. And, whether out of mission or necessity, Celia from the start committed to plucking and developing talented dancers from her company and school.
She was impeccably musical. The real hallmark of the company, Vanessa Harwood and Nadia Potts and Mary Jago, that whole group was the musicality of the dancers. It was superb, and that was from her.
She was the one who, wielded the power to allow us to go the next step in our dreams and be professional dancers. And then once you're in the company, she's the one who decides what roles you dance and when you dance.
She said, "Darling, are you sitting down?" And she said, "I've decided to cast you as Juliet." I was 18.
Karen came to my office. She was whining and saying, Miss Franca, I don't want to dance in the quarter ballet. So I said, well, go and learn Swan Lake.
It was the last thing I expected. I was speechless. It had already, my heart had been pounding to even ask if I could learn a solo part, much less a principal role.
I was very good at talent scouting. I knew talent when I saw it. I remember James Kudelka when he was aged 11, and he wore glasses.
She was really scary as a kid. I saw her as Lady Capulet, so you had that sort of vision of her. And tearing her hair out and, you know, telling Juliet what to do.
I always loved Peter Otman. He was such a sweetheart.
It was Cinderella. A lot of the students were used in the ballet. She called us her darlings. And she actually invented this way of saluting to us. That was a reverse salute, and seeing the gleam in her eyes, it was a marvelous way of engaging us.
She was pretty terrifying in the early days. I was very frightened of her.
There were more mistakes in it this time than in the first run-through. And that's not very logical. And it's supposed to be the more you rehearse, the better it gets.
And we did get better, under Celia's relentless push to excellence. The next step? To have her dancers seen and presented on the international stage.
Celia Franca asked Karen and I if we'd be interested in competing at the second international ballet competition in Moscow, here in this beautiful Bolshoi theater.
It was entirely Celia Franca's idea that as young dancers, we go to Moscow and try and compete in the competition, that she thought it would be a learning experience for both of us.
Most countries sent in 20, 30 candidates. I had 2. I had Karen and Frank, or I had Nadia and Clinton. So when I did win something, it was a hard win. I say I win when my dancers won.
How do you feel about this first ever performance by the National Ballet in London, Miss Franca?
Very happy and very excited, Tom. It's really a marvelous opportunity for us. At last, we're going to perform in the capitals of the world. I think it is part of any ballet company's development is to perform internationally.
A consensus among the theatre critics here in London is that Canada's National Ballet is off to a flying start on its European tour. Last night's Royal Gala performance took place before a full house at the Coliseum Theatre, just by Trafalgar Square. The appearance of the National Ballet here in London marks one of the most significant milestones in its 20-year history since it was formed by Celia Franca, its artistic director. The critics were impressed. The National Ballet of Canada will be performing in London, Stuttgart, Paris, and Brussels before appearances in Lausanne and Monte Carlo.
On our return, within a month, we started working with Rudolf Nureyev, who was mounting his lavish production of The Sleeping Beauty.
Celia Franca had a very hard decision to make. She had made a deal with Sol Hurok to go on tour across the United States with Rudolf Nureyev as the star.
What I really wanted more than anything for my dancers was to give them regular employment.
And I remember she took Karen and I aside. She was in tears, and she said, you know, I think I've made the most terrible mistake of my life. I have sold the National Ballet Company to Sol Hurok.
Sol knew, bless his heart, and cotton socks, but he knew that if he had Nureyev dancing 7 or 8 performances a week, he was going to make money. Nureyev had this magnetism that people would just arrive in droves. In the end, it worked out all right.
The most pivotal point in the history of the company in my time was Celia bringing in Rudolf Nureyev, how we all developed with him as our guide and mentor.
I had to keep fighting for our own dancers to get a bit of the picture.
It's only now that we realize how Celia fought bitterly hard for us to dance with Rudolf as partners, since the plan had been to bring in guest ballerinas for him. Not to speak of her fiercely going to bat for her principal male dancers. Consequently, opening night at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York boasted the roster of the National Ballet of Canada, with only Rudolf Nureyev as its guest.
The opening night seemed to be so very, very exciting, and the audience reception was fantastic. I don't think we could have hoped for anything better than we had tonight.
I think we are pleased about it.
Are you going to choreograph more for us?
Well, if they want to, only if they want to, they have to think Canadian, and if I fit into that category, it will be very nice. If I don't, no sour grapes.
She took a big risk and she brought him in, and it changed everything. Really, it did. I, of course, loved him and wanted to please him desperately and would do anything he said. In retrospect, she was very generous about it.
She was. That was huge.
She didn't make us feel really bad about it. She let it happen because it was the best thing for the company.
I wanted my dancers to do well. And on the whole, they did. Did very well.
Celia reached a turning point. We dancers see now, if we couldn't understand it then, that she relinquished her hold on the company to allow us to grow.
I think, you know, my Canadian dancers they don't have to thank me, they thank my background, if I gave them anything. I was able to get wonderful repertoire because of my own friendships before I came to Canada.
In Celia Franca's tenure, 3 of the biggest male superstars of the ballet world confirmed the company's ranking in the major league. Of utmost importance was the first, Eric Brun, the god of the international dance world, and one of the main reasons for Rudolf Nureyev's leap to the West.
I was always very fond of Eric. We had been partners in the Metropolitan Ballet, and then, of course, you know, years later, I'm in Canada, and he came and he staged La Sylphide for us. And then his friend Rudolf Nureyev came over to see it being performed. So that was how, through Eric, became our association with Rudolf.
All right. In 1974, the ballet world was rocked yet again by a male Russian superstar defector. The sensational dancer Mikhail Baryshnikov made his historic move in Toronto, Canada, and within a matter of weeks was in rehearsal with us. The first role he danced was James in Eric Brun's production for the National Ballet of La Sylphide.
That was much better to do.
Is it true that you were uncommonly severe with your dancers, that you were very hard on them?
It was my job to satisfy an audience, and whichever way I can get the best out of dancers, that's the way I tackle it.
There would be people in the dressing room almost hyperventilating that Celia was going to take the rehearsal.
The Miss Franca persona, which was mostly from my dancers.
It always felt somehow that you just never quite measured up to what she expected or thought you could give.
She was very strict in those early days.
Some dancers I used to treat very gently because I felt that psychologically they needed that kind of treatment. And other dancers, if I didn't give them a kick up the derriere, they wouldn't move. They were just lazy.
Either you measured up or you didn't.
It was hard to take sometimes.
Yeah, it was. She was pretty critical.
You know, I hear the horror stories of years and years of Miss Franca, you know, the sort of brutal dictator, and I just never really experienced that.
Although the dancers could have had their private malcontents, I think on the whole they were working well for me. I think they appreciated what I was doing for them. I was teaching them the classical ballets, for God's sake. I don't think I had really any enemies in the company. There were a few. There was a time I was having a difficult time with the ballet, and I think I was threatening to resign or something. I can't remember the details now, but I remember Betty over the phone saying, "I'll take over for you." And I thought, no, you won't.
Well, they were very different people. I never felt that Celia betrayed confidences or manipulated things behind the scenes in a way. I mean, Celia was honest with you.
They were friends.
Yeah, so I didn't see anything other than when there was the problems with the board of directors, and I understand there was some underneath work happening between the two of them.
Well, I mean, frankly, what happened was that Betty became jealous of my position. She wanted to be the big queen bee. And I had made her as big a queen bee as I possibly could. I made her the director of the National Ballet School. And that was as much as I was prepared to do for Betty.
Things came to a head when we performed Romeo and Juliet in a tribute evening to Celia Franca in 1976.
I was there on stage when the big moment happened. She was thanking everybody for making it all possible. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? She's there in costume. She played Lady Capulet, and yet she's able to systematically go through and make sure nobody's forgotten.
She was so excited that night, and she had done a magnificent performance.
She said, and there's one last person that we really have to thank, and I must thank Ninette de Valois. And
I heard this shriek, and I thought, what in the world? And Eric and Eve were helping Betty down the aisle. It made quite a scene.
I don't remember what happened, do you?
As the National Ballet of Canada headed to its 25th anniversary, the rumblings had mounted. On the home front, Celia Franca's leadership and its style again came under attack.
As of the end of this season, I am resigning as artistic director.
This was an unheard of situation, that there would not be her in that position. I mean, she'd been there for 25 years or so.
Although I'm going to drop my title of artistic director for the National Ballet Company, I still feel it's my company. I will feel it's my company when I'm in my grave.
I started a new life. I have no regrets.
I said, now Celia, why are you not continuing with this company? You were the mother, you founded it and everything, and you're still very young. She said, I have had quite enough. I have a marriage, and if I don't do something about it, you might fall apart.
Jay Morton and Celia Franca were a dynamic couple whose careers since 1969 had forced them to live apart.
She would commute every weekend. She would leave Friday night and come back early Monday morning. She was so much in love with him that she did it for years.
He was offered the job as principal clarinet of the newly formed National Arts Centre Orchestra. He was a very good musician. I went and moved to Ottawa to be with him.
Right. One big happy family.
Celia has a great dedication to music. It's a great passion in her life, and in what the partnership is between dancers and musicians. When I think about Celia making a transition from the National Ballet to being in another world and being in Ottawa and the contributions that she's made to the arts, we tease her about this because she says she was retired.
One of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had in my whole life was my trip to China.
Well, Celia Franca was one of the first who came to China in the 1970s, after the policy of opening up to the world. And then she was one of the first to bring in the Western ballet after our Cultural Revolution, you see.
I did 2 trips. I went the first time at the invitation of the Chinese government. I went for 3 weeks. That was in 1978.
When Miss Franca came over, they adored her. They wanted her there and learn what they could from her. But when they thought she was doing something that they hadn't seen before, maybe some Cicchetti, maybe some Ashton, I don't know, they would resist it. And when she finally clawed her way past all the excuses, she'd find out what it wasn't Russian.
They asked me this time to stay for 3 months. It was actually rather an extraordinary experience because there were certain rhythms. Western music was still a little bit strange for them.
Do you feel that the Franca era is over?
I'm still working. I'm not just sitting and having a, relaxing at home and cooking. I am cooking, I'm looking after my husband and my home. I'm also freelancing. I'm doing the odd bit of narration with the famous people players.
And you were in China recently?
And I was in China.
That must have been.
Now that's, I mean, my goodness, I think the Franca era is still alive if the Chinese government invites me to go to China to help them with their Chinese ballet.
Celia is the quintessential mentor, and so she was very catalytic in what became the creation of the School of Dance. She has been a mentor and an advisor, a teacher and an artistic director of the school. And she's not short on saying, not done well. She will tell you absolutely if her opinion is that you have the director to work with. She believes in all of us making dance a better subject because we pass it on. It's not something you read in a book. It's about teaching the person and about communicating the person with the person.
6 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All the way down? Or just one?
Just down to there. To this day, if I hear a piece of music from a ballet, my feet start to move.
Alexander Grant and Celia Franca performed the tango from Facade, if you can imagine, at the University of Ottawa.
Celia rings me up and said, we're going to do the tango together. So we did.
One of the giggles I have about that is there's an upside-down lift at the end of it, which is a kind of a flip lift.
I hadn't done a step in a long, long time, but somehow adrenaline helped in the performance.
In rehearsal, they never got it right, not once, but in performance, they did it.
Both Betty and Celia have been key figures in my life. It was a complete surprise when Betty asked me to become the next artistic director, but the whole time we were working together, I knew that when I started to really put my imprint on the school, that there was going to have to be a period of breakdown. I'd been the director of the school for 4 or 5 years. I got a call from Celia, and there was a tone in her voice where I thought, uh-oh, something's gone off the rails. And she said, I hear you're ruining the school. And I said, oh, if you think that I'm ruining the school, then that will absolutely give me pause for consideration. And I need you to come because I don't have a link with someone from the past. So she did. She would come down a few times a year and watch classes, and she told me some really, really inspiring things about teaching, things that she had loved about Tudor's classes, covering as much space as you can. She just opened my ideas in directions that I hadn't thought about before.
I think Mavis Staines has now become, well, you might say, my best friend.
So beautiful. So beautiful. So I think it was around the time that Jay died that she just seemed so sad and alone to me.
Demi-plié. Just marvelous.
Oh,
that's a lovely tutu. We do see eye to eye on many things.
Wearing a jacket from Eric Swan Lake.
And personally, we get along very well. We always have a good giggle together.
You tell it.
Which one?
She's got a real body sense of humor.
Yeah.
She's a lot of fun, and I don't think people really know that about her.
What you need is a $5 screw.
That's exactly what they said. And Celia looked at me and she said, you see?
She made you feel that that spark of imagination that you had was exactly what she was looking for, and she was so delighted that you understood that.
You look great.
National Ballet School. Always room for improvement. Anyway, I love you. Au revoir. Merci.
I'm so happy that she has this building. I drove up down the street here today and saw, I've seen the building going up, but I hadn't seen the Celia Franca Center, and I was just so happy for her.
Would we be in this building and having this day had it not been for her? A, coming to Canada, and B, putting it all together.
Celia, we're going to get you dancing again as we raise our glasses to toast the official opening of the Celia Franca Centre. Miss Franca will light the town square fireplace. So, ladies and gentlemen, to the future of our country and Canada's National Ballet School.
She was extremely generous with me.
The old witch at work.
It's really been a really lovely relationship, and I love her. I think she's great.
Good? Did I do a good job?
Yes. She's quite a woman. I adore Celia Franca. I love her dearly.
I'm so glad you came.
Congratulations.
I was hoping you could come.
I look up to you, and that's the truth.
Well, now I look up to you.
We may be old, but we're not down.
Celia Franca. Yes, you did a good job. Thank you for giving us your legacy. Your life has shaped all of ours.
It's all my fault. We wouldn't be here if you hadn't gotten on that plane for Canada.
There you are.
If you'd told Ninette de Valois you wanted a warm country, we would have been in serious trouble.
Oh, boy.
Cinquième en bas. And it's always a rounded position. And the little fingers do not touch your thighs. Cinquième en bas, the fifth low to the fifth center. There's always a space between your middle fingers, but not too wide, not too narrow, just perfect. And then you continue raising the arms to cinquième en haut, fifth position high. And the idea up here is to frame the face. And from there, the fingers lead the way, and you gently lower your arms to the second position with the palms of the hands facing front. You go from the second position to a lower second, and gradually you come back to base, which is your cinquième en bas, the fifth position low.